The camera seems to be kind of fuzzy, doesn't it? Is that better? Let me just try and clean it here a little bit. Not sure if it's fog or something. I saw Nisi's comment, something about can't wait to see the next background. Well, as you can see, I'm back home. By the way, a live where I was never going to happen because the connection was super, super slow. So if it took 8 hours to upload a video, you can imagine absolutely no way you're going to get this sort of thing with that kind of connection. So yeah, not going to happen. So first of all, I want to reassure you guys that this is not like it's not the end of the world. It's not like a big loss. It's not this terrible thing that a lot of people seem to think it is, right? Just to what's the word? Show that how you feeling resonates with me. I felt the same way. In preparing for this live, I went through some direct Instagram messages that I hadn't gotten to. One of them was from one of my mods, and the message read, DA drops murder charges against Barry Morphew after judge blocks most of prosecution's expert witnesses. Now, to be quite honest, I didn't read the full headline. I just sort of noticed part of it. DA drops murder charges against Barry Morphew. And I kind of got the shock. I was like, wow, did something else happen since I last paid attention to this case, and now everything has been dropped, right? So even I got a shock seeing some of those words, even though I know what the situation is, right? So the first thing to say is it's not like this. It appears as though the defense have won. It appears as though Barry's gotten his way. It appears that they're all smiles and all happy, and it all seems like an unhappy ending in terms of the legal struggle. Like, you know, it's not the way us in true crime expect things like this to go, right? So I understand that you feel that way, but I want to reassure you that you shouldn't feel that way, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. Let me just first talk to a couple of you guys. Karen Sanderson, good to see you. Stephanie, I hope your son's doing well at that rocket. Well, it's not what is it? A kind of artificial intelligence, robotics thing, right? World Championships. Hope that has gone well. Yvonne Phillips, good to see you here. Carol Johansson, number one so far, really. Wow, that's really good going. So Stephanie is like a true crime rocket scientist, and her son seems like he's a rocket scientist already. Pretty cool going, nice going. So literally right now, Stephanie's son is number one in the world in, I think, his age group in his category. So well done, Stephanie. Elizabeth says legally they do drop it until more evidence, question mark. Yes, but it doesn't sound as bad as that sounds. Stephanie says, I'm streaming it live next to me. Oh, okay, cool. So Stephanie's multitasking. So the first thing I want to do, just to shift this burden, this sense of depression, the sense of disappointment, the first thing I want to do is say the defense asked over and over and over and over again for a dismissal, and the judge didn't grant them a dismissal, right? The prosecution asked one time and they got it. So what is that telling you just in terms of that? It's telling you that what the defense asked in terms of the dismissal didn't convince the judge, right? What the prosecution asked was kind of legally sound. We're going to go through three aspects from the motion that really illustrates that in kind of a clear way. We're going to go through that briefly. So that's the first point to make, is the defense asked for dismissal, didn't get it, asked again and again and again and again. The prosecution asked for the dismissal once and they got it, right? And so you might say, yeah, but the case is still being dismissed. No. In terms of the legal request made by the one side, they were denied. The other side got their request. Another position that I think a lot of people have missed is this case was going to trial. You might say the defense were winning and the prosecution lost all these witnesses. The fact that this case was headed to trial, that Barry Morphew was going to be on trial for murder, that was already, you could say, a success for the prosecution, that they got it into a courtroom, right? So in a weird way, in a weird convoluted way, the prosecution scored 2 points. Number one is they wanted a murder trial, they got it, right? And number two is they decided we don't really want it right now. We're going to change. We're changing our minds, and they got that as well, right? That's quite important to say. The third thing that is really important to stress here, which I think a lot of people are missing, is the reason that the prosecution said, can we please just not start this trial right now, right? And the reason they gave is, we're about to find Suzanne's body. That's a huge thing. And to me, it's like, that's just been lost in the ether. No one's talking about that. And I don't know whether some people think that is just bluster, that's not true. I don't know whether even law enforcement or the prosecution are convinced that is going to be the case. It might not be the case. But if that is on the cards, then that is a trump card. So in other words, if they refile, this time with Suzanne's remains, the momentum shift is going to be huge compared to the way that this trial was going, right? And I just want to say again, if you're feeling like this is really a horrible conclusion and you're feeling like there's no justice or whatever, just sort of hold on with those thoughts and feelings, right? Christine says, justice for Suzanne. Kathy says, I keep dreaming about her body being found. I really don't understand why on my phone what I see isn't what is on the screen. Behind me, like on the screen, I see this really out of proportion thing, and it's always bothers me, and I don't know, it's one of the things I'm going to need to sort out. But yeah, on my phone it's perfect, but on the screen it's not. Anyway, Nisi says, I think the prosecution in an actual better position now. Carol Jansen says, I truly hope that they have some forensic evidence. Well, if you look at the affidavit is quite a strong document on its own. So, yeah, Robbie Robbins says it looks fine. I'm not terribly happy with how it looks. I'm not quite sure what to do. Do I push it down or do I lift it up? I think I must try and get it there. Is that better? So something I'm quite frustrated with is going on this trip. And I mean, I didn't mean to do any work, but I ended up doing a little bit of work. And then one video taking 8 hours to upload. And you might say, yeah, you go to the beach and you do something else while that's going on. Yes, but you've got to try and get it up before the next power failure. We've been having 2 power failures a day. And I've literally had the situation where it's like 97, 98% uploaded. And then my laptop is saying, you need to plug in your laptop. And then it's like literally with seconds to go, the power comes back on. I think the cell phone tower has a reserve battery that keeps the signal going for longer than, in other words, when the power's off. But anyway, that's been very frustrating. And then I was actually working on this live. I was working on the information when the power went completely off. Again, I was told when it would happen, but it kind of caught me by surprise. And while I was waiting for the 2 hours where the power would be completely off, I kind of just went and looked at other YouTube channels, looked at what they are covering, looked at, and I don't know, I was just really angry. Just, True Crime Rocket Science used to bring out books extremely fast, blogs extremely fast, that kind of thing. And look, a recipe for being unhappy is to compare yourself to somebody else. That is the recipe. And of course, I've just come from a holiday. I've got a broken rib. But it is quite frustrating dealing with 2 power failures a day. Obviously, I'm in a situation now where the internet's sort of fast again, and I'm in my home office. But, some of the stuff that I was trying to cover, I see some channels have already put up 3-4 videos on the Australia Gall case, one live after another. And, what's quite interesting with true crime is you have some cases that burn extremely fast and then they're gone. I think the Australia Gall case is one of them. Thanks a lot, Faticus. Another one, I'm not going to mention that. Then you get cases that burn medium fast. I would say the Chris Watts case is an example of that. Although in terms of the complete resolution of that was actually pretty quick as well. But anyway, let's say that's medium. Another case that was medium fast was the Gabby Petito case. And then you get cases that sort of take quite a long time. Let's call them slow burners. The Barry Morphew case is a slow burner. The Letitia Storr case is a slow burner. The Summer Wells case is a slow burner. The Laurie Vallow case is a slow burner. What's happening with Alec Baldwin, and I don't know if you guys know, he's just been cited, or the company responsible for making the production has been cited and fined, and he's saying, well, thanks, I've been exonerated. Anyway, and then there's slow burning cases. And an example of that is John Benet Ramsey and Madeleine McCann. And I think my favorite cases are medium burning cases and very slow burning cases. I don't really like the Laurie Vallow, Letitia Stork, Barry Morphew. They're just sort of the constant delays, the constant nothing happening. It's like you get involved in it, you study up, you investigate it, and then it just peters out again, and so on and so on. And it's just annoying, Some of you know this channel. I spent a lot of time working on the affidavit, and now all of that knowledge that's in our minds, it kind of dissipates, So does one do that again? Do you go through the affidavit again? Probably there may be another affidavit if there's refiling. I really don't see why that wouldn't happen. I prefer the medium burners and the very slow burners. The very slow burners are typically very tough nuts to crack. I don't like the feeding frenzy around these fast-burning cases. I don't like that. It's just, I don't know. Is that what true crime is? Who's the first guy on the ball? I don't know. In the Johnny Depp case that's happening right now, I saw the top chat was 183,000. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And when you listen to what's being said, it's, is it this substance or that substance? It's just like inane testimony. It's pretty crazy. It's not my cup of tea. I can see why a lot of people are interested in it. But yeah. Okay, so I'm going to get going here on the motion to dismiss. So the first thing to note is that it was filed on April 19, so that is the date that is on the motion, and that is also the date that was reported in the media. So you kind of get the idea that it wasn't filed a day or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days earlier, and the defense actually sat with this. You get the idea that this surprised everybody. It surprised the judge, surprised the defense, and it may even have surprised to some extent the prosecutors and law enforcement. I would love to be a fly on the wall to know who kind of phoned, who knocked on whose door and said, listen here, we have this, or we suspect that. We need you to stop the trial. Because someone had to be convinced that whatever is being sought is quite likely to be found, if that makes sense. In other words, someone had to be convinced, this thing that we're looking for, we are going to find, or we very sure we're going to find it. So something I just want to mention, when I was on holiday, I was in this sort of resort that big game fishermen go to. The island that is next to the resort is a fishing magnet. I actually, on my very last day there, I caught a very big fish. It's endemic to South Africa, and the meat's apparently incredible. It was sort of also quite a big fish as well. But the point being, it's kind of a hunter's paradise, but for fishermen, right? I'm not really a fisherman, but what I found quite interesting is that these hunters, these fishermen who are hunters, are also skilled in other things, such as launching speedboats and driving tractors or whatever with trailers onto the beach. In other words, although they are skilled at catching fish, they have other skills that are associated with that activity in terms of things like machines, speedboats, the trailers, and all the mechanics that is involved in that. And it just made me think of Barry Morphew, and he's a hunter, but he's also skilled with working with other equipment and machines. It just made me think about that. And so how significant is the Bobcat as a machine? How significant is this excavation tool in the mechanics of the story is kind of the question. So one of the last episodes I put up before the case got totally scuppered was about the cadaver dogs. I was basically saying it's on this question that, given what we knew at that time, that the defense could win this case or the prosecution could win this case. And then we know what happened. So I'm not going to read from the motion, and it's a motion to dismiss. It says specifically the decision to charge a suspect, consent to a deferred prosecution, or request dismissal are matters within the district attorney's sole discretion. That's really important to say. So just think about what is being said here. The decision to charge somebody the decision to defer prosecution, in other words, to postpone prosecution, or ask for a dismissal, are solely within the district attorney's discretion. Now, I just want to separate that from where you dismiss a case because there's no case or there's a lack of evidence. That's something else. That is something totally different. This is a scenario where it's not for lack of evidence. It's for the prosecution wanting to be in a particular position in terms of their case. So they decided to charge Barry, and they got that. Can you guys see me? Okay. So I'm going to jump just to the bottom line of this particular point. And the point is that a dismissal without prejudice, the bottom line with it is it leaves the matter in the same condition as before the charges were filed, right? You might say that is horrible. You've let somebody off the hook. But in another way, it's just resetting something to where it was prior to that. And what I think you're not seeing potentially is you've got somebody who was charged with murder, who was interrogated, who was interviewed, let's rather use that word, right? And there hasn't come a point where all of that has been legally explicated and dealt with. What has happened is there's been kind of a legal tangle, and so everything has just been kind of put on hold. That's not really resolving a legal problem. It's really just kicking the can down the road, right? So you might think that someone has gotten off or gotten away with something. It's just really resetting the whole legal machinery. And if anything, it's worse because you've now got to go through all of that again, potentially. In other words, you've got to go back to court, you've got to go through all of this again, and who's going to pay for your legal representation, right? So let's just look at some of your comments. So it's a good question from Corporal Deb. It's jumping the gun a little bit, but it is kind of the critical question. Is there a reason, or is there a good reason why they think Suzanne is buried? Now, what could have happened is while the trial was playing out and the dog handlers gave his testimony and whatnot, it could be that someone in law enforcement or another dog handler or somebody at some point their ears pricked up and they noticed something and they put two and two together, and they maybe even went through Barry's statements and basically, let's say, put two and two together. And so maybe they are chasing a theory. It could also be that have found something almost like breadcrumbs, and they're trying to find the slice of bread or the loaf of bread. Now, one of the things that just is in my mind that was quite kind of new was when the defense spoke to the dog handler, and there was something about, I'm not quite sure if it was cadaver traces or whether it was just ordinary tracking, but it was found, I think, at the South Arkansas River, which is right by the Salida home. And I was like, wow, so they found, the dogs seemed to find some traces of Suzanne in water after all. And Barry had been saying that. Barry said, of the many things that he said something about, I would look for her in the beaver dam or something like that. And if you think of that a little bit further, if you have a cadaver high up on a mountain, then why wouldn't snowmelt and precipitation bring traces of those remains down into a water source? So in other words, you might find traces in a dam or in a water source, but that doesn't mean the cadaver or the human remains are sourced in that water source. It might mean it's come from somewhere else, right? The other thing was that Barry repeatedly said that he thinks a mountain lion took Suzanne up the mountain. And I think there was also something about her mountain biking, would she go up the mountain to mountain bike? And anyway, so Corporal Deb asks, is there a reason why they think Suzanne, I think I actually misunderstood your question. Not is there a reason why they think she's there, but is there a reason why they think she's buried? Yeah, well, that's maybe a different question. Maybe there is. Nisi says, can they end up with a new judge if it goes to trial? I think it would. I think it would. You would have a new judge. You would. Yeah, I think you would. So let me just read through the motion here. I'm not going through a lot, but it says here, the effect of dismissal without prejudice, and in Latin that is nolle prosecu, is the dismissal has varied effects with regard to the final disposition of the case. In some instances, a dismissal will preclude further prosecution, and in others it will not. A dismissal without prejudice, or nolle prosecu, or prosecui, is a formal declaration of record by the prosecutor that the government will not prosecute the current case further. It is a discharge without an acquittal, right? That's quite important to say. This was a discharge without an acquittal. And the way that Barry and his daughters and even one of the lawyers, or the way they were reacting, you kind of got the sense that it looked like an acquittal from the way they reacted. And it certainly wasn't an acquittal. It was a dismissal, which is another way of saying a postponement. Now, some people spoke about another creator saying this case is never, ever going to go to trial. I beg to differ. I'm not sure whether he knows something I don't know, but unless there's cynicism that the human remains is just a ploy. But we are talking about human remains that have been missing for 2 years. So, they are still out there. And human remains tend to be very sticky, very difficult to totally get rid of. So anyway, it goes on to say, it is just a discharge without an acquittal, and it is not a bar to a subsequent prosecution for the same crimes. I'm not quite sure what that means when he says bar to a subsequent prosecution. I think it means barrier, but it could also mean a certain level that it's got to achieve. I'm not quite sure. But anyway, they go on to say a nolle prosecu order is not the final disposition of a criminal case. So let me just say that again. It's not the final word on the case. And then this is the part I've highlighted. It leaves the matter in the same condition as before the charges were filed. But the bottom line with this is it with prejudice or without prejudice? Without prejudice means you can refile, which means you can prosecute again without all the baggage and the nonsense that went into the first prosecution. The other thing is, ideally, you want to refile with a few more kind of bullets. How can I put it in another way? You've got to be careful what you say on YouTube. You want to have, let's put it in a silly way. You want to have as many potatoes in the sack as you possibly can, right? In terms of your evidence, you want to have as much at your disposal, right? So that does look like what the prosecution are trying to get to, and we do know that the prosecution didn't feel ready when they did. In December they were like, let's charge him, and then they were like, no, we're not ready. And then so there was that sense of we're not ready in the narrative anyway. Does that make sense? So that's the first thing to stress, and that's really just dealing with the definition of what we're talking about. In other words, all it is it's leaving the matter in the same place before the charges were filed. So it's kind of like, so if you, the defendant, if you're the defendant, I don't know how you can look at this and say, wow, this is a great outcome for me. Everything, the sword of Damocles, isn't it still hanging over your head? It's a question, isn't it, or is it? And I guess, we are going to find out one way or the other. So, Nisi says, I'm jelly too. Carol Johansson says, I'd be concerned that he might leave the country. Yeah. Pauline Buckle says, had they not found Lacey and Connor Peterson, I'm not so sure Scott would have been prosecuted. I tend to agree with that, but I do always come back to the Patrick Frazee case. There was a case where there was negligible evidence of calcibarus, like a tiny fragment of tooth, a burn scar, virtually nothing else. You did have the star witness in Crystal Kenny, however. That was sort of the breakthrough. So, yeah. Yeah, and Warja says with Frazee they had a confession from the mistress, not from him. But you did have, Nisi, I'm not going to CrimeCon. I'm not going to CrimeCon. That was an April Fool's joke. Okay, so let's continue with this. So now we're going to deal with three aspects from the motion itself, where they give basically the three main drivers for why they're doing this, right? So the first one is, and it's under the argument section, they talk about, and it's section A, they talk about a good faith basis to dismiss. So in other words, they're saying, we're not doing this cynically, we're not doing this dishonestly, we're not doing this as some kind of trick, we're not doing this for sort of, underhand reasons. We've got a good faith, I think the Latin is bona fide, we've got a kind of a bona fide reason for taking the position that we're taking. And to me, the words from the motion speak for themselves. When I read the motion, I'm convinced by what is said. So they say, the people and law enforcement, right, not just the prosecution, law enforcement as well, believe we are close to discovering the victim's body. That's their number one reason for having a good faith basis to dismiss the case, right? They're saying we're getting some substantial new evidence, right? So the one word that I'm worried about in that sentence is the word believe. They say the prosecution and law enforcement believe they are close to discovering the victim's body. Believe isn't evidence. Believe based on what? Now, they may be playing their cards very close to their chest, not saying why they believe that, but it's possible that they may have very good reason. Dogs may have found something. They may have a very good theory. There could be something else as well, something someone heard or saw or whatever. But believe could also simply mean it can actually be completely worthless. I believe that the moon's made of cheese. Well, that's not really going to change anything, is it? If the people in law enforcement believe based on something, that they're close to discovering the victim's body, that can be game-changing. But if they believe based not on much, if they believe based on just a theory, then maybe they're not going to find anything. They go on to say the people were hopeful, people being the prosecution, that the search for and the discovery of the victim's body would be concluded well before trial. But weather has complicated the efforts. I think that is kind of self-explanatory. I think if you live in Colorado, you know what the weather's been doing this winter. You know what kind of savage winter it's been. Is Jean Karras in the house? Jean, are you here? Anyway, Jean would be able to tell us. She's from Colorado, in fact from Boulder, I think, what the weather's been like. Is there anyone else here that is from Colorado? Stephanie says, I don't see Jean. Shannon H says, I'm at 10,000 feet in Colorado, an hour from Salida, and only a foot or so left. But okay, so Shannon, what has this winter been like? Has it been unusually snowy? Has it been unusually cold in Colorado? Would you say it's been, Jen H, good to see you. Jester Gypsy says, I live in Colorado. So the question is, has the weather been unusual this year? Like, has it been unusually cold, unusually snowy? Tiff says, I'm from Colorado Springs and we had a mild winter. Okay. Shannon says, usual amount of snow for winter. Jester Gypsy says, the mountains have gotten a lot of snow. Okay. So, yeah, well, then I guess there's not much of an argument for that. Shannon says some mountain ranges had more than usual. Yeah, so then there's, I don't know if you could say, anyway, the motion says this area received a significant amount of snow over the winter months before a search could be completed. So that's the argument. So you might say, I live here and we didn't get snow, so it's not true. And so you could say it's a BS argument. Or you could say it's a valid argument. I don't know. Anyway, it says, to date, the area is 5 feet of snow, concealing the location where the people believe Miss Morphew is located. What I do think lends credibility to the statement is where they say the people cannot safely excavate this area. In other words, they know where it is and that they know the area that they want to excavate, but they can't do it safely. That's the issue. And that, to me, it's not like just a question of, well, there's snow in the way. It's also a question of safety, and that to me gives it there's something that resonates to me that this might be valid. The words are quite interesting as well, where they say, and resolve this unanswered question. By filing this motion, the people have complied with Rule 48A, a motion to dismiss submitted in writing, publicly available, proffered in open court, and accompanied by a statement. So they're just saying everything we're doing in good faith. We're giving as an offer of proof why we're doing this. Well, we think we're about to discover the victim's body. We know where it is. We can't excavate safely, and so The thing that is definitely quite interesting to consider is right now it is approaching the 2-year anniversary of Suzanne's disappearance. So one would imagine whatever the conditions are like around about now, those are the conditions that were in play when someone possibly hid her remains. So if there's snow now, there should have been snow then. If there wasn't snow on that specific date, there probably isn't snow 2 years later, if that makes sense. Just something to consider. Okay, so now we go on to the next section, B. The interests of the public and the defendant are furthered by dismissal. So in order to have their case dismissed, it's got to be in the interest of the public. So in other words, and this is where, again, I want to reassure you, if you're feeling disappointed, done in, dismayed, all those things, what they're saying here is the reason this was done is actually it's in the interest of the public that it's done. It's in your interest, right? And they say it's also in the defendant's interest, not prejudicing the defendant. And so listen to how they say this. The ongoing investigation into the location of the body must be resolved to further the interests of the public. The public seeks a swift resolution of this case, but more than anything, the public seeks an indisputable answer as to whether or not Ms. Morphew is dead before her killer can be held accountable. So you can imagine if this case goes to trial, almost at every turn, you can imagine the defense saying, but we don't even know if she's not alive. We don't know for sure that she's not alive. So whatever you are arguing in terms of your scenario, at any turn, the defense can kind of turn around and say, but we don't even know for sure that she's not alive. And that's not very good for the prosecution's case, because it's a valid counter-argument. On the other hand, getting an indisputable answer robs the defense from bringing that up all the time. So do you see why this is an important point? So it says that the public seeks a swift resolution, but more than anything, seeks an indisputable answer as to whether or not Ms. Morphew is dead before her killer can be held accountable. This motion also protects the defendant as it spares him from a jury's fast approaching and potentially unfavorable verdict. And then they go on to say, these are examples of bad faith dismissals, or trying to dismiss something in bad faith. That is bribery. So someone comes along and says, I'll give you so much money if you just have the case dismissed. That would be bad faith. That would be a betrayal. That would be dishonest. Not liking the victim. So if you sort of say to, if it's like a situation of, because I don't like the victim, I don't really mind who did whatever. In other words, there's bias. Disagreeing with the jury panel selected before trial. So in other words, wow, I don't like my chances. This jury just doesn't look like it's going to find in my favor. Let's dismiss the trial. That would be bad faith. And then also, anyway, they say none of these are present here, right? No bribery, nothing about not liking the victim, and the jury panel hasn't even been selected at this point. So it also goes on to say, this dismissal does not serve to harass the defendant in any way. Courts have consistently found that even refiling a case several times is not enough to constitute harassment. That's quite an interesting point. So even if they refile and dismiss several times, the defense can't really argue harassment. They say the mere act of dismissal is not enough to carry this burden. It's pretty interesting from a legal perspective. And then that brings us to the final part, which is victims' rights. And before I get to that, I just want to look at some of your comments. Not there yet says, I don't seriously think Suzanne would have left. KM says, old African saying, slowly, slowly catch a monkey. What's that saying in Gladiator where the guy says something about taking little bites? I think it's a sea creature that takes little bites slowly out of something. Leah Simpson says it's much more than a coincidence that she hasn't been seen or heard from since texting her boyfriend one afternoon. Someone asked, does anyone really believe she would abandon her daughters? Okay, so now we're going to deal with victims' rights. So the prosecution spoke with Melinda Moorman, the victim's sister, and she's also the primary representative for the Moorman family. And this is where I think it's quite important. You might say, I'm not very happy with this, or I think it was the best thing or whatever. But it really comes down to what is the victim's family, how do they feel about this? And often it's got to pass this final hurdle as well. If the victim's family aren't happy, then they feel like this isn't the right way to go, then you might not get your dismissal. In other words, if they say, no, I refuse to go along with this, I want this case to go to court, well, then your hands could be tied. And so Melinda Moorman said that she agrees with the motion to dismiss. And to some extent, can you see how that's in the public interest? Melinda Moorman is part of the public, but very much, very intimately related to the victim. And the fact that she supports this, you can see how there can be sense in it if family members support it, if that makes sense. So I just want, again, you to not get the sense that this is a big, that the prosecution have made a big mess of this case, and that what is happening is a total botching up of the cases, and this was their one shot at prosecuting Barry, and it's all over. I don't want you to think that, because I don't think that is the case here. Suzanne's family support what's going on here. They also say the prosecution spoke with Andrew and David Moorman, the victim's brothers. They are also in agreement with this motion. Then it says, for obvious reasons, the people have not endeavored to speak with Macy or Mallory Morphew. That's quite interesting, is that in getting the victim's family support, they did get that, but they didn't go to Macy or Mallory, and I would wager that it was a big surprise to them what was said in court on the 19th. They say, so let me read this. For obvious reasons, the people have not endeavored to speak with Macy or Mallory Morphew, but would be happy to hear their position in court. As such, given the ongoing investigation, that's quite important to highlight, the investigation is still going on. It hasn't finished. And it's investigating something that is really, really important. Are there human remains that could be found? So the final sentence, or the penultimate sentence, is, as such, given the ongoing investigation, the state of the evidence, and the position of the victims, the people ask this court to dismiss the case at this time. And then it ends off with a really strong final sentence. This dismissal is in the best interest of justice, the people, the defendant, and the public. And I've got to say I agree with that. Do you guys agree with that? Let's see what you guys say. Do you guys agree with that position? Diana says agreed. Kathy says yes. Carol Jansen says, I think it's so important that we have empathy and kindness for Suzanne's children. Nisi says yes. So a lot of you saying yes. Debbie McClellan says no. Andar says yes, one of the daughters was, okay, Pauline Buckles. So a lot of you are saying you agree. Zircon says, I'm not sure. But what I think, aren't you getting a stronger sense that this isn't this huge setback that it appeared to be? It's not this huge failure that one kind of had the impression of. It's actually kind of well known in legal circles. They did it in good faith. They seem to have good reason. And I believe, if they find Suzanne's body, then, I thought the prosecution had a fairly strong case going into this. But if they find human remains, I think their case will be stronger by 30%, 30%, which is a lot. So that is really what they want. They want to strengthen their case. They want to strengthen their hand. Lindsay Maglin, thanks very much for that. Nisi says, no, I don't think anything that I did from initial shock. Okay. Kathy says, listening to the defense attorneys, it sounded like doomsday. It's quite a good question from Faticus. He says, if they decide to prosecute in the future, it won't be double jeopardy, question mark. Now, just bear in mind, the case hasn't been prosecuted, right? It's not like there was a criminal trial and they're going to restart the criminal trial. There were preliminary hearings and motions and all that kind of thing. And there was this effort to get certain witnesses accepted and rejected and whatnot. But it's not like the case was actually being heard. Elements of the case were being evaluated. It's not like they heard the case. The criminal case didn't actually get started when it got stopped, right? So it's not double jeopardy in that sense. They do refer in the motions to certain aspects. Let me see if I can find it. I'm not sure if I copied it here. I'm not sure if I've got it here. But basically, is it not here? Sorry, I'm just going through this. The defendant's bond would also be discharged. The case, in the event that the case is refiled, the defendant retains all of his rights to further litigation. And it says, oh, here it is. And perhaps collateral estoppel on issues already decided. So certain issues that come up, the defendant can say, no, we've already decided that. So there are certain things where they can refer to this previous court narrative and say this was established and that the defendant can rely on. I think it's called estoppel. So that's quite a good question. So in any event, double jeopardy doesn't apply, but it may apply, it doesn't apply broadly, but it may apply narrowly. If that makes sense. Yvonne Phillips says, now that I understand the details, yes. Lindsay says, I haven't even had the chance to study this case whatsoever, but I'm just floored by Nick's insight. Oh, thanks a lot for that. Top notch. You guys are doing excellent. Thank you. Thanks for that. Patricia Byrne says double jeopardy is archaic. It's nevertheless, it is relevant. You can't keep retrying someone. But like I say, it hasn't actually gotten to the trial stage. Susie says beard looks thick. Okay. I'm actually a little bit ungroomed, so Alison says, good point. There was no jury in place either. So that's really important to stress. It wasn't like you tried certain arguments in front of the jury, and so the jury's kind of gone through it already. That isn't even the case here. So that's definitely quite a good point. I'm not sure if I understand what Nisi's getting at. We say that's why they did it, to avoid double jeopardy. No, I think they did it because all along, I think they were hoping that a remains would be found. They weren't found, but maybe there was a sense that we're almost there. And I also think to some extent it was cutting their losses. I think they weren't happy with, I mean, the previous court session, I think they said words to the effect of, you've gotten rid of so many of our expert witnesses, it amounts to a dismissal. And then the very next hearing, they asked for a dismissal. So that context, I think, is also relevant. That context definitely matters when they ask for their dismissal. So to me, sitting at my feet, and I must say he seemed quite, I don't know whether he's depressed or tired or both. I think he was having the time of his life where he was, and he was just very quiet in the car. He normally wants to get out and whatever, and he was just quite quiet. He's sleeping at my feet right now. I don't know whether he's tired, or I know, he was like chasing cattle on the beach. He was chasing dogs and cats every single day, and coming back, this must seem like the desert of the real, like nothing much is happening here. All there is to look forward to is True Crime Rocket Science ASMR, to me is about 2 years old. Yeah. Nisi says looked like he had a blast. My legs are quite sore, so I'm imagining he is similarly tired. So something to mention, there was like a true crime thing going on where I was, obviously on a sort of much lower scale. There was a dog outside my door that was starving and that was not in a good way, and it had an injury to its rear end. And somebody said that this dog had been SA by a baboon, right? And when I first heard that, I thought, my instinctual response to that was that's far-fetched. That doesn't sound right. I've never heard of that before. And then someone piped in, no, it does happen, whatever. And then on my last day there, in fact, at night in the bar, there's a guy, like a 30-year veteran, a guy who lives there. And I told him about the dog, and he said, no, that dog, because it's had so many pups, because it's not fixed, it's had puppies after puppies after puppies after puppies. Part of her, let's just say, apparatus has been sort of damaged, and that's actually the reason for it. And I find that quite interesting, how sometimes in true crime, the more unbelievable thing is reality. In other words, sometimes in true crime, the baboon, the baboon, in terms of that being the craziest story, ends up being the reality. In other words, you don't know which one it is, but the one seems crazier than the other one. And sometimes in true crime, the baboon, the crazier reality turns out to be what happened. In my experience, it's more typically the more ordinary explanation, right? So in the Australia Gall case in New York, to me, the handyman was the less likely story, specifically because of the access to her phone. Just how intimate was he with her that he would be able to access her phone? And I guess the answer is, he got to know well enough that he was able to do that. But I mean, the way that you could look at that question is one particular person could have incredible access to her phone and compare that to the handyman. And of course, you don't know how close she was to the handyman or for how long. But I'm just saying it's kind of an interesting thing in true crime. Sometimes the crazier reality is reality. The crazier scenario is the real scenario. As I'm just saying, in my experience, it tends to be the one that's less sensational, does that make sense? Not always, but typically. Patricia Burns, that's the word, yeah. Those are the words. Not there yet, okay. I'm kind of done. This is only an hour long at this point, but I don't really have much more to contribute. I really just wanted to address the motion to dismissal and address your disappointment with regards to it, and just say there's not really, it's disappointing that the trial's not taking place, but I think it's for a good reason. And so there's reason also to hope for the prosecution and law enforcement coming forth hopefully in the not too distant future with better evidence. So, it's possible we're going to see in the media a story either saying authorities return for 5th, 6th, 8th, 10th time from the mountain empty-handed. Authorities have given up the search for Suzanne Morphew, or authorities have found something. You know what I mean? It's going to be one or the other. And that's probably going to play out over the next days and weeks in May. Salty Panther says, I missed the beginning. Why is the case dropped? It's because the prosecution think they are about to find human remains, and they've been going into a murder case without a body, and they feel like they really need that. And they feel like they're about to find the body, they just need a bit more time. So that's their reason. Stephanie says, thanks, Nick. It's good to see you. How is your rib healing? Thanks for the question, Nisi. Thanks a lot for that. I'm very tired, so if I'm a little bit out of it, it's a little bit past my bedtime. But what I will tell you is I can sleep on the side where the rib is. I can cough quite hard. I can run slowly. I can do almost anything without the rib being a problem. I can't sneeze in a totally unrestricted way. And there are times if I'm sitting or in certain movements where I can actually feel the rib still flexing like that. So I do still feel it. I will probably go and kick in the pool tomorrow, and I'll start indoor cycling this weekend as well, going into next week. So I must say I'm feeling quite encouraged in terms of my fitness that is sort of coming back on track. I had a very interesting last day. In fact, it may even have been, if it wasn't the best day, it was one of the 2 or 3 best days. But on the day that on my last day there, a chap arrived with a mountain bike. He was the only guy who arrived with a mountain bike while I was there. And it turned out that he'd also broken a number of ribs and actually punctured a lung during a really bad fall. He was riding a road bike race. He was going 50 plus kilometers an hour, and that's when he fell. And I won't take you through all the gory details, but he actually ended up in hospital. He actually got back onto his bicycle, rode another 50 kilometers. And I think he was in shock. He didn't quite realize what had happened to him. Anyway, went from there to hospital, and they gave him the same news I got, which is you got some really, really serious injuries, and what we're going to do is nothing. And so even though he had a punctured lung, all they did was they drained the fluid from his lung, and they didn't really do anything else, which I found like unbelievable. It's like with ribs, we cannot do anything. The human body is in control. We budding out. But it was just incredible hearing his story that, he had a bunch of cracked and broken ribs. He got on his bike again. And then, anyway. But it was also nice him being able to sympathize with not being able to breathe very well, and the whole setback of not being able to train, and the weirdness of you've got a very, very serious injury, and what can be done about it is nothing. It's kind of weird. Sky Kerrigan says, I just got back in, my internet shut down. Susie says, no cast for ribs, kind of like a toe. Okay, so I'm kind of done with the true crime thing. So those who came here for that, you can leave if you like. I don't think I'm going to be on for much longer. Maybe 5 minutes longer. Someone says defensive injuries. Jen H says, good to hear your ribs are healing successfully. Thanks for that. Maria Martinez says, Suzanne went missing in May. She actually went missing on the 9th of May. Was it snowing? No. In fact, she went mountain biking that day. So, it was I guess the weather was quite good. Diana says, great show. Thanks for that. Not there yet says, appreciate the passionate discussion. The Crypto Zoo says, I went to the area camping and it was freezing at night and hot in the day. Yeah, so mountains do have that kind of variable climate, exactly as you've described it there. So tomorrow I'm going to be talking about the Alec Baldwin case. So two things have happened. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure whether this is the investigation. I know an investigation was being conducted, but I kind of thought it was from law enforcement. So I don't know if this is that investigation or if this is another investigation. But regardless, the investigation has come up with their report and Alec Baldwin has responded to it. And so I'm going to be dealing with that tomorrow. I'll probably do it not as a live, as an episode. And then Ursula Gal, I'm not sure if I'm going to continue covering that just because it's pretty much open and shut at this point. I'm also not sure if I'm going to cover Johnny Depp just because I don't know. Let's do a quick poll. Who here would like me to cover some of the Johnny Depp stuff? bear in mind the Morphew case is now kind of on the back burner. I was going to be covering the trial, and I've sort of set myself up to do in-depth coverage of the Morphew trial, and now that is not on anymore. So some people say no, some people say me. The only thing I've kind of got against the Johnny Depp case is it's kind of about things that aren't really important. You know, he hurt his finger, and how many drinks did he have? And it's kind of like inane, you know what I mean? I'm not saying it's not, it's sort of entertaining. It's got its sort of, it's got that sort of entertainment value. But I don't know if we should be, I don't know, should we be paying attention to that instead of other cases like, you know, Letitia Stork, Laurie Vallow, Madeleine McCann. The Madeleine McCann anniversary, 15-year anniversary is coming up as well. Should we be allowing that stuff to crowd it out? On the other hand, you have things like the Will Smith slap. People are curious about it, and maybe it is worth talking about it. One thing I have noticed with Johnny Depp is some of his answers are incredibly slow, and he often says, "I don't recall." And somewhere he said he didn't remember the details or something, and then he remembered incredible details like, what was it? He remembered how many drinks he had, the size of the bottle, and it had a handle on it. And so he remembered all of these details. He couldn't remember these details, but he could remember those. But to me, you sort of go into that analysis, and it's like, but what are we actually doing here? At the end of the day, you know, it's two people bickering. You know, I don't know. So I suppose one could have a look at it. Nisi says, would much rather you cover more true crime cases or art crime. Susie, to anyone says he thinks too long, he's acting, not sure if he can help it. Stephanie says Van Gogh letters. I wouldn't mind doing that, but my channel's taken a massive blow from covering Van Gogh. Like every time I put up Van Gogh, it's like minus 20 subscribers. I mean, I've got the book here. Anyway, let me think about it. Instead of doing either or, maybe I can do a little bit on Johnny Depp and a little bit on other things as well. You know, then I can keep everybody happy. Lindsay says, can you do the Serpil for me? I suppose I could. I just want to make sure of something. Yeah, it's that case. Iowa City Serpil murders, yeah. Yeah, it's pretty grisly, that one, that's for sure. Good point from Delcy. You say the Depp trial is less depressing than war or the pandemic. Debbie Sims says, I can't watch it live, way too slow. Can only handle the clips on double speed. I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, I was also like forwarding it. Cotton Star says this is also the 15-year anniversary of Amanda Knox. Interesting. Stephanie says to Cotton Star, are you definitely going to CrimeCon? If yes, mind if I message you? Okay, so we passed 1 hour 15. I think that is it for me. I'm really tired. Definitely, I didn't sleep that great last night. Part of it was uploading a video through the night, so my laptop's on, and so you sort of wake up, oh, it's 32%, and then you wake up, oh, it's 43%, and maybe that's also why my dog's exhausted, was the that doing that work through the night. That could be that. Debbie Sim says good night. Robbie Robin says, I need to look at your Knox videos. You do, Robbie Robin, you do. Letitia Stork trial, yeah, if it happens. It's supposed to be happening, but is it happening? We'll see. Sky says good night. Yeah, okay, so look out for Alec Baldwin tomorrow, and I actually don't think I'll be doing another live tomorrow, but probably Saturday or Sunday. So look out for that. I do kind of want to talk about the Australia Gull case, just because that is, I think, a case that has been solved by DNA, and also lots of evidence. There's been a heck of a lot of evidence in that case. What is quite interesting with that case is it was very sloppy, very badly executed crime. And I know when it happened, I just thought this case is going to be solved super quickly. I think they talk about an orgy of evidence. There definitely was. The guy left his boots in the trash. I think he left his jacket there, or a T-shirt. There were even bandages. He even cut his hands. And in any crime where there are a lot of knife injuries to the victim, there are often knife injuries to the perpetrator as well, which is quite interesting. You may remember Jodi Arias' knife injuries. Jodi Arias injured her finger. In the Amanda Knox case, Meredith Kircher knife injuries. Were there any injuries to the perpetrators? Question mark. Lindsay says, I live by Iowa City, so I'm very interested. I might cover that at some point, maybe soon, maybe we'll see. Stephanie said, I'd love to hear more from you about the Gull case. One thing that I found interesting was that this whole removal of the body from the home just seemed extraordinary, and then also on foot. But something that even before the handyman was identified, something that seemed a bit strange was if someone from inside the home who lived in the home left the home, he'd have to go back. So he'd have to have walked back past the doorbell cameras. So if you thought it was someone who lived there with her, well, then why didn't it show this guy walking back a few minutes later without the bag, right? Does that make sense? Okay, get some rest. I'm going to get some rest. I really got to go and sleep. I'm really doing that. So I've got some photos and video that I haven't put up of the trip, just some nice photos of beach scenes and stuff. So I might put that together as well. Thanks to the 130 of you who are still here. Sorry I can't make it longer, but this is really all I wanted to touch on. Thanks to members who are here, Jean Cass, who've missed you, Bria Lace as well. Oh, Jean's in now. Jean, we wanted to know whether the weather in Colorado has been unusual this year, unusually cold, unusually snowy. And yeah, thanks to you guys for your super chats and those who've been following my little journey last few days. Mace Wendy says, click a like before you go, please. wow, Jean says not really, less no. So that kind of, in a way, makes you wonder, is the prosecution how can I put it? Is their argument completely legitimate, or is something else going on? Or they're trying to wriggle out of a case that wasn't going their way, kind of thing. So anyway, I guess time will tell. Okay, guys, take care. Thanks a lot. See you next time. If I don't see you again, have a great weekend. Take care.